Okay. Well, my name is Victor Oladokun, and it's a wonderful pleasure moderating this session this morning, Bold Measures to Feed Africa. And I want to emphasize something before we get started this morning, and that's the word bold. I think if you look up any of our panelists here online, you're going to find something that they've talked about concerning food and food security on the continent. But the last time I checked, the word bold means courageous. It means audacious. It means enterprising. So what we really want to talk about this morning are some of the bold measures that you're involved in personally with your institutions, or that we should be engaged in to change the agenda on food and food security globally, as well as what we need to do to again move the needle forward. So our objective this morning really is not to rehash the past, talk about our challenges per se, although those are important, but what we're really going to be looking at are some of the bold measures that we do need to take. Roger Thoreau did mention a few moments ago during the earlier session that given the informality of Iowa, which I highly respect, that we will revert to referring to our panelists by their first names. Well, I'm from the Global South, and we don't do that. So kindly permit me, we'll be a little bit more formal as the Global South meets the Global North this afternoon. So please bear with me on that as we remain formal for this session. Somebody once said that the future was yesterday and that we're already late. And when it concerns food security, that indeed is the case. In a world of so much abundance, it is a paradox that the world, and indeed Africa, still cannot feed itself. But we're going to move the agenda forward this afternoon. Again, we're not going to be able to solve the problems of the world in 45 minutes, that's just the reality. But our panelists are truly experts in their field, and they're going to bring a tremendous amount of wisdom, insight, and knowledge to our session. And that's not hyperbole, that really is fact. And we're truly, truly blessed to have this distinguished panelist, a group of panelists with us during this session. So to my left, I have Dr. Gérardine Mukeshimana, Rwanda's former Minister of Agriculture and Animal Resources, a post she held, I believe, for 9 years, making her one of the longest-serving Ministers of Agriculture on the continent. And today she serves as the Vice President, International Fund for Agricultural Development, IFAD, where she champions initiatives to empower smallholder farmers across the continent. So we appreciate you joining us this morning. Thank you very, very much for being here. We're also joined by Dr. Cary Fowler, the U.S. Special Envoy for Global Food Security. And Dr. Fowler is an exceptional global thought leader and, as we've heard earlier, this year's esteemed Co-World Food Prize laureate. I think we can do a whole lot better than just acknowledge that. Let's give him, again, we can't give him more than enough applauses because that really, truly is a great honor. Welcome and thanks for joining us. And for those of you who do not know, Dr. Fowler is best known as the father of the Svalbard Global Seed Vault, a truly creative, future-proof facility that provides ultimate security for more than 1 million unique crop varieties, as well as the strategic raw material storehouse for all future plant breeding and crop improvement efforts. A huge initiative by the US government. Again, Dr. Fowler, thanks for joining us. And we're also joined by Professor Soon-Kwon Kim. He is an amazing individual in the field of developing high-yield maize and rice varieties, and his work has really been crucial to food production and productivity across Africa. Again, you're welcome, Professor. Thanks for joining us. And to his immediate left is Mr. John Olajide. He's the founder and CEO of Axxess, the chairman of Cavista Holdings, and he is the board chairman of the Corporate Council on Africa. He's a very influential global leader, and since we're talking about food, he really has put his money proverbially where his mouth is and is engaged in very, very significant private sector initiatives and investments on the continent to improve food security. And I'm sure we'll be hearing about some of that during this time. And last but certainly not the least is an executive vice president, or the executive vice president of Mastercard, Tara Nathan. And as you'll find out in a moment, she is exceptionally passionate about the work that she does, as well as efforts to drive financial inclusion and digital inclusion on the continent. Distinguished ladies and gentlemen, these are our panelists, and we're truly honored to have them with us this morning. Once again, if you could kindly give them a warm round of applause. I'm going to start with Dr. Mukeshimana first. Last year in January, we had the Feed Africa Summit in Dakar, and it was really an amazing event that brought together probably over 35 heads of state and presidents from all over Africa, as well as all the key players on agriculture on the continent. During that period, $30 billion plus and counting were pledged. Well, you were at that event. IFAD was prominently involved at that event. What has happened since then? What have you done with your pledges? And what country compacts are you involved in?
Thank you. I think IFAD being into that compact was one of our DNA, because we are have a long-lasting relationship with the governments, and we work in small-scale farmers. We make sure that we are supporting them to increase the production of food, but also to make sure that we are providing the tools that they need so that they can thrive. So when the compact was happening, it was in the middle of cycle of IFAD 12, and from that time, I think IFAD has been able to send 1.6 billion down in Africa, and that is from the core resources of IFAD, and we have been able to work with the other partners to mobilize climate finance, and I think we have mobilized around 700.
What countries are you having the most success in? Because again, the extent of involvement depended on how responsive each of the governments were to the compacts that they signed. So where are you having the most success?
We've been successful in Senegal. We just released over 200 million for supporting the Senegalese as a food sovereignty. We've been successful in Tanzania to support the youth and horticulture program. We have been in Djibouti and Cote d'Ivoire. But what is more important is that it's not how much money goes there. What is super important is how do we target the small-scale farmers that are heavily hit by the climate change, where they have contributed nothing. The previous speakers, they spoke about how much money goes into agriculture. So when it comes to small-scale farmers, it's less than 8% of money that goes into them. So that shows us how much support is needed there. And going forward, IFAD 13 is going to be one of the bold steps that we are taking. We are going to be supporting our small-scale farmers. I mean, the fragility is increasing. So we see a lot of conflict everywhere, but we are known for being the ones who stay with these governments when everyone else has left. So we are committing 40% of our resources to be targeting these countries that are into the fragile context to make sure that we are not leaving them alone. That's one. The second one is also, again...
but allow me to play the angel's advocate here. I'd rather say the angel's advocate, but a lot of people talk about supporting farmers when it comes to fragility. I want us to go beyond phrases and slogans. In what way is IFAD doing that?
So IFAD has been able to work with the farmers' organizations, because sometimes you find yourself that you are dealing with de facto governments, and I mean, those are the ones who are controlling national banks and accounts and so on. So when it gets to that point, everyone will be saying, okay, our money is going to be directed somewhere where it's not supposed to be. And we make sure that we work around that and we develop instruments that are making sure that our target group, that is our farmers, are being still catered for. So that's what we do. We deal with the fact that the governments are that way, and we develop other instruments like working with third parties that are still working on that. And the reason we don't quit, I mean, when it's a fragile context, we will assume that immediate needs are needed. But as long as we are now investing into lasting sustainable solutions, the conflicts are not going to end. So it's really important that we look at what is immediately needed, but also how do we invest for long term, and that's what IFAD does at the best.
Thank you very much, Dr. Gérardine. I'm going to come to Dr. Fowler here. For quite a while, you talked about how Africa's opportunity crops could really make a big difference with regards to Africa's food security. Now, opportunity crops, not too many people might be familiar with that phrase. Would you mind unpacking that for us and explaining why that's really important?
Sure. Well, I'm passionate about what we call opportunity crops. In the past, they've gone under a lot of different names: neglected, underutilized, minor. But as Lindiwe Sibanda from the CGIAR said, no, they're really opportunity crops. So why are they opportunity crops? These are the indigenous and traditional crops in Africa. They haven't been prioritized a single day since the Neolithic, since they were domesticated thousands of years ago. And yet we have a situation all across the continent of not just undernutrition, but malnutrition, a lot of stunting among children under 5 years of age as a result of micro and macronutrient deficiencies. These traditional and indigenous crops, fruits and vegetables and legumes and cereals, roots and tubers, seed crops, they are nutrient rich. They're opportunity crops because their potential has never been realized. But now we have a real opportunity with those crops to realize that potential, and the opportunity is there because the need is there. It's also there because I think we've recognized the potential of these crops, and a number of organizations that are represented in the room today are involved with this, from the CGIAR, the World Vegetable Center, African Orphan Crops Consortium, and others have realized that these play a central part in people's diets and could play a bigger part in their diets and in farming systems, by the way.
And examples of some of these opportunity crops would be?
Sorghum, teff, finger millet, grass pea, lob, pigeon pea. There's so many different, African eggplant. There's so many different crops, many of which are unfamiliar to people in the United States, but they shouldn't be.
Teff is beginning to make a breakthrough in Europe and in the US, so hopefully that will be the case with
it's
some of the
making
other
a breakthrough because that crop and a couple of others on our list have begun to get some investments. And we think that if we pile investments into the other crops, we can help farmers diversify production, diversify their farming systems, make them more resilient, and dramatically add to the nutritional quality of diets in Africa.
Earlier you defined opportunity crops also as neglected crops. I think before we can fix the problem, could you help us identify why they were neglected in the first place and why we haven't taken full advantage of them? What are some of the factors responsible for that?
Well, you know, I hate to say it, but if you look at the staple crops in Africa, you're looking at crops that come from other continents. And so I think you have to look at the history in Africa and the fact that we collectively have put so much investment into these particular crops. The problem there is that A, we haven't realized the potential of the indigenous crops, and B, some of the staple crops that we see on the African continent today are not predicted to do that well in a climate changed environment. So we need to diversify that production. And if we want to meet food needs by 2050, the time to start is not 2049. The time to start's now.
So what is it that we can do to safeguard some of these opportunity crops that you're talking about, particularly when it concerns climate change? Are we doing enough? If not, what it is that we can and should do?
Well, there has been a lot of progress recently. I know that 20 years ago, we probably couldn't have had this conversation. There are now more than 150 plant breeders in Africa that have been trained, most of them up to the PhD level, many of them women, have been trained up on these particular crops. We have new technologies, we have institutions across the board from FAO and the CGIAR and IFAD that have come into this space, realized the importance of this. So our moment is now, and this is the opportunity.
How confident are you that we can really make a change, given the political will and the technologies that are available? How confident are you today?
Well, I'm quite confident. The African Union itself has prioritized these particular crops. And when we in the State Department with the African Union and with FAO launched this program just 2 years ago, we said that we wanted to change the conversation. We wanted these crops and also soil health and fertility to be part of the essential fundamental conversation about agricultural development in Africa. And here we are on the stage talking about it. So I think we're beginning to change that conversation.
Thank you very much, and thank you very much for the role that you've played in this regard. We're going to come on next to Professor Soon-Kwon Kim. Thank you for, again, the excellent work that you've done in Asia and also in Africa. For those who are not really familiar with your work has had a very, very profound impact on the continent. Given that that's the case, what are some of the innovations that you see that are high yielding and also climate-resistant crop varieties in conjunction with what Dr. Fowler just talked about right now? We need seeds and we need crops that really can contend against the ravages of climate change. What are you seeing and what innovations can we take advantage of?
Yes, thank you very much for your invitation. This is my first time, and I met first, I think, the Excellency Norman Borlaug at the Ghana Airport Hotel in 1980, and the coup was just, so yesterday coup was, a military coup was came. He and I was in the same hotel, and we had a nice discussion. And later he came to IITA, and I was the senior maize breeder, working on maize-streak virus, and also first time for hybrid maize. So that was my meeting with the Excellency Norman. I respect him so much. Yeah. And first, I think the Korea, in case of the South Korea, the miracle economic development started with the self-sufficiency of the staple food rice. Yeah. With the ED, Korea developed called the unified rice, Dongil rice, crossed with the IRA, from ED crossed with the Japonica. So made the short, so that's make the miracle, rice called and increase make the self-sufficiency of the Korean, staple food. But we had experience. When I came back from the US, and later I talk about the hybrid story, hybrid corn story, ED and the Korean scientists tried to push the high resistance of the 3 rice variety of the Dongil. Is increased about 50% more yield, but high resistant to rice blast by single gene. I told them, if this one will not broken down in 5 years, you can cut my 5 fingers. My boss was very upset. We nearly want to push the rice, and even I had a big argument of Bichel, even the famous rice breeder at ED, and this was broken down in 3 years. So whenever you have rice, so sorghum or millet or anything is with high resistance, clean, administratively like the clean one, clean, beautiful one. But that single gene, there are no guarantee for stability and durability. All of your, particularly administrator, I nearly want to tell you that must be quantitative, several genes. Don't try to control 100%. Like the maize striga, they consider Africa is belong to them. And if you work for striga 100 years, you work, the striga failed because of the try to control eliminate the striga parasitic weed from Africa. That's the mistake. In case of rice, Korea is now, it has problem with produce too much rice. And we are helping, the African countries called the K rice belt.
So Professor,
yeah.
given South Korea's success with rice, which again they've exported very successfully to Africa, but I'd also like to reference what I would call the amazing Soon-Kwon Kim maize that is also making a difference. Rice and maize. How is it that Africa can again scale up the production of some of these varieties?
Yes, first, hybrid in Nigeria, before I joined the IITA in Nigeria, first I came by the US, I nearly appreciate US taxpayer money. US people's money brought me at the East West Center and studied University of Hawaii and University of Illinois. To put this, 1970, single cross hybrid maize. In our textbook, single cross cannot be used as a seed. So I came and all, US produced the single cross hybrid maize. So I tried to challenge to bring this one to Asia. Even my professor first time said it's impossible for developing world. I said, I'm the poor farmer's boy. Yeah? I will try. Either I die or I cried so much after I see the beautiful maize in Ames, Iowa, in the Champaign-Urbana. Beautiful, hybrid maize, single cross. So my professor at University of Illinois, Dr. Art Hooker, University of Hawaii is Dr. Jim Brubaker, the famous, both are friends of the Norman Borlaug. And so I tried to finish my PhD, master's and PhD 3 years and 3 months, although US government offered me 4-year scholarship. I have to return to Korea because I learned the technology. Pioneer offered me $3,000 salary per month. I went to Korea as a US PhD, $48 per month. I went to Korea. I really struggled. Nobody supported my ideas. I said, I saw this one in US. Why, we cannot do this one in South Korea? So, but I finally succeed to the single cross hybrid maize to adopt, to be produced in South Korea. So the President Park, our president ordered me to go to Hawaii and to multiply the seed during the So when I returned with the 16 tons of seed to return to Korea, they said, our minister said, this is impossible. Nobody support, even international centers. Nobody no professors in Korea is support your idea. I said, if I fail this, I will go to jail 10 years. Please allow me to plant half of the seed. So we plant, and nearly that was the single cross success in Asia. So we tripled, farmers tripled the income increase. So I transport that technology through the escape to Asian countries, India, China, Thailand. India, Thailand was so opposed of this idea. So, but IITA called me and I went over there. In IITA, we had the maize streak virus, CGIR activity. My major work is the maize streak virus, striga, and the hybrid. Nigerian government support, make this success of the hybrid development. Even nobody supported the hybrid development. Minister and the chairman of the selection committee, Abiola, came to us. Why only US, South Africa, Zimbabwe grow the hybrid, why Nigeria can? I said, if you give research fund, I'll do. So can you promise to develop within 3 months, 3 years? I say yes. If I cannot succeed, you can cut my neck. So US, Nigerian government.
Prof,
Okay.
I think you're really upping the ante
Yeah.
every single time.
No.
First of all, it was either you try or you die. And then it's your neck and your hand. I'm getting really concerned.
That's the way, but I want to mention the Dr. Adesina and President Obasanjo nearly helped to succeed this hybrid maize. First formation of first seed company in West Africa. I want to ask you the privatization of the seed is very, very important. If you give everything free to farmers, you will spoil the farmer. You must sell. Farmers, small-scale farmers, they have to feel they are the small business person. They can produce more, grains or more food. They sell and increase income and educate their children. That's the important. So that's the way I think the maize and the rice has a comparative advantage for Africa to compete to the world, even US. US in the most GMO. In Africa, if you are doing the healthy maize without chemical use, I think that you can compete, but you must have the trading, industrial, development of the food, not just the self-sufficiency. That's the way I think the Africa, I like the title bold measure, should be bold measure. This can, I think we can revolutionize the food production in Africa.
Thank you very much, Professor. We'll come back to you in just a few moments. But again, what passion, what vision, just like Dr. Norman Borlaug here, Professor, you've really placed everything on the line during your career, and that's what it takes many times, visionary leadership that risks everything, and you've done that. So we thank you for your commitment to Asia and also to Africa. I'm going to come next to Mr. John Olajide here. You've certainly put your money where your mouth is. Now, as an investor and as the chairman of the board of the Corporate Council on Africa, from where you sit, why is it important for us to enhance public-private sector engagement? And what is it that you're doing that you believe is really going to make a huge, big, audacious, and bold difference on the continent?
Victor, thank you so much for the question, and thank you for having me here today. It's my first time at the World Food Prize event, and unlike Dr. Kim, I haven't offered my neck up to anyone yet, so I'm not that bold. And in addition to that, I know that this is a distinguished panel, as you can tell, and there are lots of folks here. I haven't been in the agriculture business for a long time, so please apply a healthy discount to everything I'll say. I'm an entrepreneur in my DNA, the way I'm wired. So, and like most entrepreneurs, we haven't found any problem that we care enough about that we don't want to solve. So I think I should provide some background for my background so you understand what I do. So I'm the founder of a healthcare technology company called Axxess. It's the leader in the world in providing technology services, software for the delivery of healthcare at home. That's what I've done. That's my claim to fame. That's what I'm known for. And as that has continued to succeed, I'm from Nigeria originally, proudly so. I wanted to set my sights on doing more good on the African continent. And, Dr. Kim talked about purpose. He had an opportunity to take a job that paid $3,000 a month and he took a $48 job month instead because of that purpose. So the reason is why did we decide to set our sights on the African continent and try to make a difference? It's three reasons, really. The first one is jobs. The second one is jobs. And you can guess what the third one is. More jobs. So we set up a holdings company, Cavista Holdings, to invest in the African continent. And we're investing across different portfolios, different sectors. Software technology, Cavista Tech. Today, it's the largest employer of software engineers in Nigeria. I'll get to agriculture, just give you a background. And then we have a hospitality asset that we're investing in. We took over a resort that had been totally run down and took it over and turned it around today. It's the #1 resort destination in Nigeria for the past 2 years. We've been in that asset less than 3 years, just so you know that. And then agriculture, and then fintech. But let's talk about agriculture specifically, because it's a personal one for me, Victor. My dad is retired in Ekiti State, specifically a place called Erimokpa Ekiti in southwest Nigeria. And whenever I go visit Nigeria, I'll go spend time with my dad. I'll spend a few days there, just catch up. We'll walk around the village, trade stories and all kinds of things. And then I'll head back to Lagos, Nigeria, the commercial capital, to go about my business. So for about 15 years prior to this one engagement, we had been doing lots of charity work. We provide food and help widows and do all kinds of things for people, especially around the holidays, to help them ease the burden of dealing with the holidays. Well, what I found was every year I'll come back and give them bags of rice and bags of beans and sugar and money and chickens and all these things, and they'll be excited and I'll feel good about it and I'll be gone. And after a while I started wondering what happens for the whole year in between to these people. I'm doing good, but I'm not really moving the needle. I'm not making a difference, really. So I got my team together and said, let's do some research. How can we make a difference in a sustainable manner? Part of my background is I'm a past chairman of the Chamber of Commerce in Dallas. It's the largest Chamber of Commerce in the country, the most successful as well. And so I understand economic development very deeply. So I had my team do research to understand how we can move the needle for this community where my dad lives, where there are just lots and lots of challenges. So we did research, and it was clear to us that agriculture was the key to make things work. And we also took a step further to do even more research into what government was doing, what the public sector was doing in trying to move things forward. As much as they cared to do, the reality is the results didn't speak much for anything that was happening. It was clear that there may have been good intentions, but they weren't well suited for the types of outcomes and impact that was needed in those communities. So now we knew it was agriculture. We knew it needed to be private sector driven. The next question was, what type of agriculture? What should we do exactly? I had another team of experts, and through my membership with the Corporate Council in Africa, we founded a company, Africa Global Schaefer. They've been on the African continent for over 50 years doing all kinds of work. So we partnered with them and asked the question, we know it's agriculture, what can we do? Because in that part of the world, you throw a seed on the ground, you come back a few days later, it's already sprouting, So it's very fertile. Clearly lots of opportunities there. So and after the research just said it should be cassava, because that part of the country is the cassava belt. So Dr. Fowler and Dr. Kim, please add cassava to the opportunity crops list. Would greatly appreciate that. So we knew it was cassava that needed to be done. But there are two things that we were thinking about. How do we achieve scale in making sure we can have the type of impact we wanted? And then how can we ensure value addition? How can we make sure we can help all those communities and pull them out of the shackles of underdevelopment and shackles of misery and shackles of hardship that they have in a lot of those communities? The young men are gone already. They're in the cities. And it's just older women and children. They're incredibly challenged. So we approached the government, got land. The title that we got to the land wasn't worth much of the paper. The paper was written on, because when you get to the place where the land is, there are communities that are there already. And when you start trying to clear the land and prepare the land and get all these things done, I've learned a few things in 3 years now about land clearing and plowing and preparation and harrowing and things like that. But it was so challenging to get in there. And the key to success is what I'm getting at is how deeply we needed to engage the community engagement. Because if you're thinking of those scales, so we have a 10,000 hectare tract, and we have a partnership with the government now to do 100,000 hectares. But the key to the success there is to partner with the local communities, because as we do that work, they have to recognize that as we progress, they progress, because the initial challenges were they were at arms saying what's going on here. And so it's a journey that continues.
I just want to clarify here, John. It's not just about producing the cassava tubers itself. It's the value addition that you talked about, because if my memory serves me well, there are probably well over 35 derivatives from cassava. Is the community going to be involved in that process also?
Yes, they will be. But the challenge is, before you even get to the highest levels of value addition, there are a lot of things that you have to overcome. And like he was saying, you have to build an ecosystem to make it work. So the short answer is yes. It's a journey that is continuing to unfold, and we'll keep you up. It's Agbeyewa Farms. It's a farm that we're managing. So the answer is yes. It's a long journey to get there. And I'll say one last thing, Victor, before I stop. There are lots of companies that have tried cassava processing, where they've built cassava processing plants all over the place to try to take advantage of the value addition opportunities that you referenced. You know what the number one challenge they face is?
No.
No cassava. They can't find, there are no inputs, because no one is doing anything at scale. So you have this $100 million facility, $50 million facility, $25 million facility to process cassava into all the different options in the value chain, but there is no cassava. So a lot of those factories are sitting idle, doing absolutely nothing. So in our case, we could have put up a mill as well and do $100 million at it, because we spent tens of millions of dollars of our own capital, no outside capital, our capital, because we care enough about this problem to figure it out. And we recognize very quickly, it's the hardest thing to do, is to cultivate the cassava over large tracts of land, but it's the right thing to do for sustainability.
I want to congratulate you on what you're doing, for the bold steps that you're taking, and for the huge risks that you're also taking physically, as well as the patriotic zeal that you have exhibited on behalf of Nigeria. I don't think that it is perchance that Tara Nathan is to your left, because everything we've talked about so far, at the end of the day, comes down to what she is extremely passionate about, and that's one, financial inclusion, as well as digital inclusion. Mastercard is doing some really, really groundbreaking work in that regard. You've got the Community Pass. Talk to us about that, as well as other initiatives that you're involved in, that you believe will significantly move the needle when it comes to Africa's food security. Over to you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting us. I'm with Mastercard. I'm the founder and the EVP of a business called Community Pass, as you mentioned. So it's very fortunate that I've been placed, I think, at the end here, because what we do as Mastercard, maybe it's our first time here at the World Food Prize Foundation event here, and we're so excited to be here. But you might be thinking, what does Mastercard have to do with agriculture? And that's an interesting story. What does Mastercard do? We're a digital infrastructure company. That's what we do. We make transactions happen globally in a safe, secure, scalable way, globally, right? And it's the common payment transaction that we all know, and hopefully every single one of you has that Mastercard in your wallet today. We're not just a digital technology company. We're an ecosystem organizer, and that's a word that's come up several times, starting with World Bank President Ajay Banga, and also in your recent comments. So what does that mean? It's what you said, right? In order to make commerce happen, in order to make transactions happen in a scalable fashion, you have to have a platform, not just a digital platform, but rules and mechanisms that bring in all the various partners that are required to make the ecosystem work. So what's the huge, bold idea that we're doing at Mastercard is that we've taken our core competency in digital payments and we've applied it to the agriculture world. We've applied it to doing good in the world. So that's what Community Pass tries to do, is we've built a digital platform that connects the smallholder farmer to the input manufacturer, to buyers, to lenders. And what we do is by creating all that on a digital platform, we've now given the smallholder farmer who lives in a very remote rural village, we've made them visible. That smallholder farmer who maybe earns $2 to $5 a day is typically thought of in development terms as a beneficiary, as somebody who needs a handout, somebody who needs aid. And what we're trying to do through the Community Pass platform and through the MAID Alliance that we launched earlier this year is bring together that ecosystem of partners, be it the African Development Bank to be donors and funders, be it Mastercard to provide that digital platform, be it Microsoft to provide connectivity. We're connecting all these actors to turn that concept of a beneficiary into a small business owner. Because that's what a smallholder farmer is. They're a small business owner. But they're confined by unreasonable sort of contexts, right? So that small business owner doesn't have access to inputs. They can't buy real seeds. If they have to buy the seeds, they don't have access to the capital, sometimes as little as $10 to $50 to purchase those seeds. Then they plant the crop. They can't wait till the crop comes to maturity when they can get the best price, because they have to sell it early in order to pay for medical expenses or other sort of household expenses, because they don't have access to credit. So what does the Community Pass digital platform do? It digitizes all that information, puts it on a digital identity, and enables a smallholder farmer living in a remote or rural community to now leverage their own data to access authentic seeds, to access a lender to get credit to pay for that, to access markets so that they can sell their offtake and that they're not beholden to a middleman or to a buyer who comes to their farm gate and offers them whatever they want to. And then most importantly, it digitizes that whole thing so that they have a track record and they start to build a P&L, like a small business owner. And so that's what the Community Pass platform is doing.
And I just want to give you a last word here, well, penultimate last word, on MAID, which is mobilizing access to the digital economy that you're working on in conjunction with the African Development Bank. How is that different from what you just described?
Yeah.
It's an alliance between yourself, the African Development Bank, and other partners, but what is MAID trying to accomplish?
So mobilizing access to the digital economy in Africa, partnership with the African Development Bank, what it's doing is unlocking this whole challenge that I just laid out. So you have that farmer who doesn't have access to credit because the ecosystem of not only lenders, the financial institutions don't exist. The African Development Bank comes in now and provides first loss capital, de-risks the development of that ecosystem by funding things like, you need the devices, you need cards, you need terminals, but you need access to capital so that the lenders are willing to crowd in and provide that loan to the farmer so that they don't have to sell early. Providing that loan to the farmer so that they can buy the credit to get access to the authentic seed. You can lend to a buyer, right, so that they can discount their, what we call invoice discounting, right, so that they have access to sort of fund that bridge between when the farmer gets paid and when the buyer wants to pay.
Thank you very much, Tara. And because we've almost run out of time, I'm going to give the very last question to our 2024 World Food Prize laureate. 60 seconds to give the final word based on what you've heard and where you see the continent going down the road.
Okay, well, I'll take less than 60 seconds. And since we're at the Borlaug dialogue, I want to channel Norman Borlaug for a second. He famously said, take it to the farmer. And if you knew Norm Borlaug, you would also have to acknowledge that he was extremely persistent. He just didn't give up. And I think that's what we have to do. We have to think outside the box. We have to do some bold, imaginative, creative things, and we have to keep at it.
Absolutely, never give up. Again, echoing the words of Professor Soon-Kwon Kim, who never gave up in spite of very challenging circumstances, giving it all, just as everyone else on this panel has. I'm going to call on the Vice President of the African Development Bank, Dr. Beth Dumford, if she's backstage to give us a final wrap on what we've heard. But before as she makes her way up to the platform, to the lectern, I'm just going to say a very quick thank you to Dr. Gérardine Mukeshimana, Dr. Cary Fowler, congratulations once again, Professor Soon-Kwon Kim, Mr. John Olajide, and to Ms. Tara Nathan. Thank you very much for really enriching this conversation this afternoon and for sharing your insights. Thank you so much.